"You're nothing without me," my fiancée yelled. I said, "We'll see." Then I quit my job, started a business, and met someone new. 2 years later, she showed up at my office crying. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey Reddit. This happened about 2 years ago. My fiancée and I got into a fight over the wedding. She said I was nothing without her and called me pathetic. So I quit my job at her dad's company, cut ties with her entire family, and started from scratch. I built a business, met a woman who actually respects me, and built a good life for myself. Then one day, she showed up at my office, broken and desperate. Here's what went down. So I, 28 male, thought I had life figured out. Solid account management gig at a major logistics company, decent apartment, and a fiancée Lexi, 26 female, who I'd been with for 5 years. We were supposed to get married in 6 months. Her dad, John, basically ran half the company where I worked. Dude's a senior VP with serious connections. He got me the interview years back, which seemed like a blessing at the time. Lexi's family has that old money attitude, where they genuinely believe they're better than everyone else. John would casually mention how he built men's careers, and how loyalty was everything in business. Her mom, Patricia, would correct restaurant servers about wine pairings and tip exactly 15% because that's what service industry people expect. These people had never heard the word no in their lives. The contrast with my own family was stark. My parents, Mike and Carol, raised me and my older brother Ryan with solid middle-class values. Dad worked as a high school principal, Mom was a nurse, and they taught us that respect is earned through character, not bank accounts. Ryan, 31 male, works in construction management, never liked Lexi from day one. She talks to you like you're her employee, he told me after the first family dinner where she met everyone. And the way she corrected Mom about how to serve dinner? Who the hell does that? I defended Lexi back then, making excuses about her being nervous or wanting to help. But Ryan just shook his head. Dude, nobody talks down to our parents in their own house. I don't care how much money her family has. The red flags were always there, but I was too caught up in the lifestyle to see them. Lexi would introduce me at parties as my fiancé who works for daddy's company, like I was some employee benefit she'd earned. She'd order for me at restaurants, interrupt my stories to clarify details, and had this habit of touching my arm while laughing at other men's jokes, like she was showing off her obedient boyfriend. My parents only met Lexi's family twice, but that was enough. Mom later told me she'd never felt so uncomfortable at a dinner party. They kept asking about our little house and whether we'd ever considered upgrading, she said. Like our home wasn't good enough for their son-in-law. Dad was more direct. That girl doesn't respect you, Jake. She talks over you, corrects you in front of people, and treats our family like we're charity cases. You sure this is what you want? But I was in too deep to listen. The wedding planning revealed who she really was. We're talking about a $100,000 ceremony for 300 people, most of whom I'd never met. When I suggested maybe starting smaller, she looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Jake, this isn't about what we want. This is about maintaining our family's reputation. People expect a certain standard from us. Our family. Like I'd been adopted into royalty. She'd spend hours on her phone coordinating with vendors, talking down to them like they were servants. Watched her make a florist redo an entire proposal 3 times because the shade of white wasn't sophisticated enough. The woman was literally screaming at someone about flower petals, while I'm thinking we could buy a car with what she wants to spend on decorations that'll be thrown away after one night. When I mentioned wanting my parents to help with some of the planning, Lexi's response was swift and brutal. Jake, my mother has planned dozens of events like this. Your parents are sweet, but they've never organized anything more complicated than a backyard barbecue. Let's leave this to the professionals. The breaking point came during our final venue visit. The coordinator asked about my guest list, and I mentioned wanting to include my college roommate Liam and some work friends who weren't in management. Lexi actually put her hand up to stop me talking. We've discussed this, Jake. Your college friends don't really fit the aesthetic we're going for. And inviting people below director level from the company could send the wrong message about hierarchy. Right there in front of the wedding planner, she reduced my closest friends to props that didn't match her vision. I felt my face burn with embarrassment, but I stayed quiet. That night, driving home, the tension was thick enough to cut. You embarrassed me today, she said, not even looking up from her phone. Daddy's already concerned about your judgment, and suggesting we invite your drinking buddies doesn't help your case. I asked what case she was talking about. That's when she laid it out. Let's be realistic, Jake. Your salary is adequate for paying your bills, but it's basically pocket change compared to what Daddy provides. Without this family, without his connections, you're nothing. You were a guy in a shared rental making 40 grand a year before Daddy gave you a chance. Don't forget where you came from. 5 years of my life reduced to charity work. Every promotion I'd earned, every late night I'd worked, every success I'd achieved, all just John throwing me scraps. You know that moment in Goodfellas when Henry realizes the life isn't what he thought it was? That's what hit me. Everything clicked into place. The condescending comments, the way she managed my social interactions, how she'd correct me in front of her friends like I was some rough diamond she was polishing. I looked at her scrolling through Instagram, probably posting about our perfect venue visit, and said the two words that changed everything. We're done. She didn't even look up at first. Don't be dramatic, Jake. You're having pre-wedding nerves. No, Lexi, we're done. The engagement is off. I am done. That got her attention. The phone dropped, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine shock on her face. But instead of hurt or sadness, what came next was pure entitled rage. She started screaming about how I was ruining everything, and how dare I humiliate her family like this. Do you have any idea what this will do to our reputation? We've already sent save the dates. I'll have to explain to everyone that my fiancé had some kind of breakdown. Not that I was unhappy. Not that we had problems to work through. Just that I was inconveniencing her social calendar. When I started packing a bag, she shifted tactics. Tears, promises to work on things, offers to scale back the wedding. But I was already mentally gone. The person crying on the bed wasn't someone I'd ever actually known, just a character she'd played to keep me in line. Then came the threats. She called John while I was still packing, putting him on speaker like she was summoning backup. Dad, Jake's having some kind of episode. He says he's leaving. You need to talk to him. Within 30 minutes, both parents were at our apartment. John looked like a man whose stock portfolio had just tanked. Patricia kept asking if I'd been drinking or if there was someone else involved. They genuinely couldn't comprehend that their perfect daughter might not be irresistible to everyone. Son, let's think about this rationally, John said, like he was closing a business deal. You're obviously under stress. Wedding planning affects everyone differently. Why don't you take a week to cool off? Maybe talk to someone professional. When I told him there was nothing to think about, his whole demeanor changed. The friendly father figure mask dropped, and I saw the corporate shark underneath. Jake, I'm going to say this once. You're making a mistake that will follow you for the rest of your career. This family has given you everything you have. Walk away from us, and you'll find out how cold the real world can be. I thanked him for the threat and walked out. Spent that night at Liam's place, but the first call I made was to Ryan. About freaking time, he said when I told him what happened. I've been waiting 5 years for you to wake up. That whole family treats people like servants. You want me to come get you? I'm good for tonight. But thanks. Jake, seriously, I know this feels like shit right now, but you just dodged a bullet the size of a whale. She would have spent the rest of your life making you feel like you weren't good enough. The next morning, Ryan showed up at Liam's place with coffee and that honesty I'd been missing for years. Look, I know you loved her, but love isn't supposed to make you feel small. The way she talked to mom and dad, the way she dismissed your friends, the way she managed every conversation you tried to have. That's not a partner. That's a warden. I called my parents later that morning to tell them the engagement was off. Mom's response was immediate relief. Dad was direct. He said it was the best decision I've made in 5 years. Their support meant everything, especially when I went to HR that Monday with my resignation letter. My direct manager, Steve, was confused but professional about it. Within 2 hours, though, I was getting pulled into meetings with senior leadership. John had clearly made calls, trying to retain me before I could leave with whatever inside knowledge I had. Is there anything we can do to address your concerns? Asked the VP of Operations, like I was negotiating a contract renewal. John speaks very highly of your potential here. I kept it simple. Family circumstances, exploring new opportunities, grateful for the experience. But I could see them exchanging glances. Nobody quits a good job right before their wedding unless there's serious drama. By Wednesday, Lexi was blowing up my phone with increasingly unhinged messages. Started with apologies and promises to change, escalated to accusations that I was throwing away 5 years over nothing, and ended with threats about what would happen if I tried to embarrass her family. Ryan read some of the messages, and his face went dark. This is stalking. She's threatening your career, your reputation, everything. You need to document all of this in case it escalates. The final message was pure Lexi. You think you can just walk away from us? From everything we built together? You'll be back when you realize you can't make it without Dad's help. Don't expect the door to still be open. That's when I knew I wasn't just leaving a bad relationship. I was escaping people who viewed other humans as property. The first month of freedom felt like waking up from a bad dream. I'd forgotten what it felt like to make decisions without running them past someone who'd find three problems with every choice. My parents offered to let me stay with them while I figured things out, but I needed my own space to rebuild. I found a small apartment across town. Ryan helped me move, and we made a day of it. Grabbed lunch, talked about the future, and for the first time in years, I felt like myself again. You know what's crazy? Ryan said while we're setting up my living room. You're smiling again. I haven't seen that relaxed look on your face since before you started dating her. My business plan had been brewing for months. Supply chain optimization for mid-sized companies was a perfect niche. Big corporations had internal teams, small businesses couldn't afford specialists. But there was a sweet spot in the middle where companies needed expertise but couldn't justify a full-time hire. Dad was immediately supportive when I explained the concept. You've got the knowledge and the work ethic. If anyone can make this work, it's you. Your mother and I didn't raise quitters. I wanted to do this on my own. My savings weren't huge, but enough to live lean for 6 months while building a client base. I'd learned logistics inside and out at John's company, and I knew the industry well enough to spot opportunities their internal teams missed. But 3 weeks after I left, weird things started happening. Cold calls to potential clients were getting cut short. Guys I'd worked with for years were suddenly too busy to meet for coffee. One contact, someone who'd seemed genuinely interested in working together, canceled our lunch meeting with a vague excuse about timing not being right. Then my neighbor mentioned seeing a BMW parked outside my building multiple times. Same car, always during business hours when most people were at work. I mentioned it to Ryan during our weekly check-in. They're watching you, he said matter-of-factly. These people are used to controlling everything around them. They can't handle someone walking away, so they're trying to gather ammunition to bring you back into line. The breakthrough came when I finally connected with a mid-sized furniture manufacturer through a college connection who didn't run in John's circles. Their CEO, Frank, was old-school blue-collar who'd built his business from nothing. When I explained my background and what I could offer, he was interested enough to let me analyze their distribution system. I spent 2 weeks mapping their entire supply chain, found redundancies that were costing them $50,000 annually, identified bottlenecks that were causing delivery delays, and developed a restructuring plan that would pay for itself within 6 months. But while I'm working on Frank's project, the harassment from Lexi's camp started ramping up. Mutual friends were getting calls asking about my mental state and whether I was handling the stress of starting a business. Patricia was posting Facebook messages how some people need professional help during major life changes. Mom was the first to notice the social media campaign. Jake, that woman is posting about you online. Not directly, but it's obvious who she's talking about. She's trying to make you look unstable. Dad's response was immediate and protective. That's defamation, son. She's trying to damage your reputation and business prospects. Have you talked to a lawyer about this? The most frustrating part was how calculated it all was. Nothing directly actionable, just a steady campaign to plant seeds of doubt about my stability and judgment. They were trying to isolate me professionally, while I was trying to build something from scratch. Ryan wanted to handle it more directly. Give me John's address. I'll go have a conversation with him about appropriate boundaries. Ryan, no. That's exactly what they want. To make me look like the unstable one. We handle this the right way. Frank's project was a huge success. Delivery times improved by 30%, storage costs dropped by 40%, and customer satisfaction scores went through the roof. More importantly, Frank was impressed enough to refer me to 2 other companies in his network. You know your stuff, he told me after reviewing the results. But I gotta ask, why'd you leave a good corporate job to go out on your own? That's a hell of a risk. I gave him the sanitized version about wanting to build something myself, but Frank had been around long enough to read between the lines. Well, their loss is everyone else's gain. You've got clients for life here. Word was starting to spread in the logistics community, but I could still feel the shadow of John's influence. Meetings would go great until someone mentioned checking references, then suddenly they'd need more time to evaluate options. My parents were my biggest cheerleaders through all of this. Mom would call weekly to check on my progress, and Dad started referring potential clients from his network of school district administrators who needed logistics help. We're proud of you, Dad told me during one of our Sunday dinners. Building something from scratch takes guts. Your grandfather would have loved to see this. By month 4, I had enough steady work to move into a small office space and hire my first contractor, a data analyst named Kevin, who could handle the number crunching that was eating up my time. Kevin was fresh out of college, hungry to prove himself, and brilliant with optimization software. The business model was working. I wasn't trying to compete with the big consulting firms that charged $500 an hour for junior associates to run PowerPoint presentations. I was solving real problems for companies that needed expertise but couldn't afford enterprise-level solutions. But I knew the real test was coming. John's network ran deep in the logistics world, and eventually they'd have to choose between passive-aggressive sabotage and open warfare. Given what I knew about their character, I wasn't optimistic about their restraint. Around month 5, I was finally starting to feel like the business had real momentum. Word of mouth was bringing in steady referrals, and I was actually turning down projects that didn't fit my focus. That's when Lexi decided to escalate from behind-the-scenes sabotage to direct confrontation. I was grabbing lunch at a sandwich shop near my office when she walked in. Not a coincidence. She'd clearly been tracking my movements somehow. The moment she spotted me, she marched over with that entitled smile that used to make my skin crawl. "Jake! What a surprise seeing you here," she said loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "I was just telling Patricia how worried we've all been about you." She sat down at my table without being invited, continuing her performance for the other customers. "You know, everyone's been asking about you, how you're doing since your episode. It's so brave of you to try starting your own little business." The condescension was thick enough to cut with a knife. She kept referring to my breakdown and how the family was concerned about my decision-making. Made it sound like I was some unstable ex-boyfriend who'd had a mental collapse and was now playing pretend businessman. "I actually have a meeting in 10 minutes, I told her, hoping she'd take the hint. "Oh, with a real client?" she asked with fake concern. "That's wonderful. You know, if this little consulting thing doesn't work out, Dad might be willing to put in a good word for you somewhere. He feels terrible about how everything ended." She genuinely couldn't comprehend that I might succeed without her family's help. In her mind, I was just playing dress-up until I came crawling back. But then she crossed the line. Started asking the guy at the next table if he'd heard about how difficult it was for small businesses to survive, especially when the owner was dealing with personal issues. She was literally trying to sabotage my reputation with random strangers in real time. I stood up and told her this conversation was over. That's when the entitled Karen really emerged. "Don't you dare walk away from me," she said, loud enough to make everyone stop eating. "I'm trying to help you. You think you can just pretend like we never happened? Like you didn't spend 5 years living off my family's generosity?" The whole restaurant was staring now. She kept getting louder, talking about how I was ungrateful and delusional if I thought I could make it without their connections. Started listing everything they'd done for me like she was reading an itemized bill. "My father gave you a career. I gave you 5 years of my life. And this is how you repay us? By embarrassing our family and pretending you're some big-shot entrepreneur?" The manager finally came over and asked her to lower her voice. She turned on him with the full Karen fury, demanding to know if he knew who she was and threatening to speak to his corporate office about customer service. I walked out while she was still berating the manager about the kind of people he was allowing in his establishment. The whole thing was so unhinged that I actually felt embarrassed for her. But it also confirmed what I'd suspected. They weren't going to let this go quietly. Ryan called me that evening after hearing about the incident through mutual friends. "Jake, you need to take legal action before this gets worse." My college buddy Tom, who'd become a lawyer, echoed Ryan's concerns when I called him for advice. "What she did today isn't just harassment. It's defamation. She's making false statements about your mental health and business practices in public settings. That's actionable." Within a week, we had documentation of the restaurant incident from witnesses and a pattern of behavior that showed clear intent to damage my reputation. We sent a cease and desist letter to the whole family, but I knew it wouldn't stop them. If anything, it would probably make them angrier. Tom warned me that wealthy families like theirs usually fought dirty when backed into a corner. "They're going to try everything they can to discredit you before this gets to court. Document everything. Don't engage with them directly." He was right. Within days of sending the cease and desist, someone created fake online reviews for my business, claiming I was unreliable and had personal issues that affected my work quality. Anonymous posts on industry forums questioning my credentials and suggesting I'd stolen proprietary information from my previous employer. But my small client base rallied harder than I expected. Frank and 2 other satisfied customers posted detailed reviews about the actual results I'd delivered, completely burying the fake ones. One client even wrote a LinkedIn post endorsing my work that brought in 3 new inquiries. Ryan was furious. "These people have no shame. They're trying to destroy something you built with your own hands because they can't control you anymore." The campaign backfired because it was so obviously coordinated. All posted within 48 hours, all using similar language, all making vague claims about reliability issues without any specific examples. Industry people could spot astroturfing from a mile away. 2 weeks later, we filed formal defamation and harassment claims against all three family members. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following month, but I knew the real battle was just beginning. Around month 7, I started spending time at this coffee shop that had become my unofficial meeting space. That's where I met Andrea, 27 female. She was a freelance interior designer, working on her laptop in the corner booth most afternoons. We started with casual conversation about work, life, the general struggle of building a business from scratch. Andrea was everything Lexi wasn't: independent, supportive, genuinely interested in what I was building rather than what it could do for her. When I told her about the lawsuit and restraining order, she didn't judge or ask if I was over-dramatizing. She just said, "Good for you for standing up to them." Too many people let bullies get away with that kind of behavior. I brought her to Sunday dinner at my parents' house after we'd been dating for 2 months. The contrast with introducing Lexi to my family was incredible. Andrea asked Mom about her nursing career, talked shop with Dad about education policy, and genuinely enjoyed spending time with people who weren't trying to impress her. "She's wonderful," Mom told me while we were cleaning dishes. "She treats you like an equal, not like a project that needs improvement." Ryan's approval was more direct. "Now this girl is the one. Also, she's hot." "Happy for you, brother." She ended up redesigning my office space when I expanded to a larger location. Working with her showed me what collaboration actually looked like. Two people with different skills helping each other succeed instead of one person trying to control the other. The restraining order hearing went well. Tom had documented everything: the restaurant incident, the fake reviews, the campaign of character assassination. Their lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive ex-boyfriend, but the evidence was overwhelming. The judge granted a temporary restraining order, requiring all three of them to stay away from me, my business contacts, and any venues where I was conducting meetings. John's lawyer tried to argue this would interfere with his business activities, but the judge shut him down. "Mr. John, if conducting your business requires contacting your former employee's potential clients to discuss his personal life, perhaps you need to reevaluate your business practices." By month 8, I was profitable enough to hire a full-time project coordinator. The restraining order seemed to be working. Radio silence from Lexi's family for the first time in months. Business was growing steadily. I was dating someone who actually respected what I was building, and life felt normal again. Then Kevin mentioned something during our weekly team meeting that made my blood run cold. He'd been networking at an industry conference and overheard some concerning gossip about John's company. "Might be nothing," Kevin said, "but there's talk about some kind of internal audit happening, financial irregularities or something." The guy I was talking to said John has been acting really stressed lately, missing meetings, that kind of thing. I filed that information away but didn't think much of it. Companies had audits all the time, and John being stressed could be about anything. I was more focused on landing a major client that would really establish my firm's reputation. That's when Andrea and I decided to make our relationship official on social media. Just a simple photo of us at dinner with a caption about enjoying the evening. 2 days later, I got the Lexi meltdown. I was in a client meeting when my assistant buzzed through on the emergency line. "Jake, there's a situation at the office. You need to get back here immediately." I rushed back to find 2 police officers in my lobby, and Andrea sitting on the couch looking shaken. Apparently, Lexi had shown up screaming about how I was flaunting my new girlfriend and demanding to know who Andrea thought she was. She was completely unhinged, Andrea told me. Started calling me names, saying I was just a rebound, and that you'd come crawling back to her when reality hit. When I asked her to leave, she got in my face and started screaming about how I had no idea who I was messing with. The officers explained that they'd been called when Lexi refused to leave and started threatening Andrea. She'd violated the restraining order by being at my office, and they'd arrested her when she became belligerent with them, too. "Ma'am tried to tell us she had every right to be here," one officer said with a straight face. "Got real angry when we explained that wasn't how restraining orders work." Tom handled the legal fallout while I dealt with the business impact. Having your ex-fiancé arrested at your office isn't exactly great for professional credibility. But my team and clients were incredibly supportive. Andrea handled the whole thing with more grace than I would have. "I've dealt with difficult clients before," she said, "but that was next-level entitlement." She genuinely seemed to believe she had some kind of ownership over your life. My parents were horrified when I told them what happened. "That girl needs serious help," Mom said. "Nobody should have to deal with that kind of harassment." The restraining order violation resulted in a larger fine and a stern warning from the judge about jail time for future incidents. But I knew this wasn't over. Desperate people do desperate things, and Lexi's family was starting to look very desperate indeed. Over the next few months, pieces of information started filtering through mutual friends about what was happening with John's company. The internal audit Kevin had heard about was actually a federal investigation into financial irregularities. Someone had reported suspicious activity, and the police was quietly building a case. Sarah, who worked in the accounting department, reached out through a mutual friend to give me a heads up. She felt guilty about staying quiet while they'd tried to destroy my reputation, especially now that she knew why John had been so desperate to control the narrative around my departure. Jake, John has been using company funds for personal expenses for years, she told me during a careful phone conversation. Family vacations charged as business development, Patricia's shopping sprees categorized as client entertainment, even Lexi's car payments through fake consulting contracts. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. The investigation was moving slowly but methodically. Federal prosecutors don't rush cases like this. They build them brick by brick until the evidence is overwhelming. John was still showing up to work, but everyone could see the stress eating at him. Meanwhile, my business was thriving. We'd grown to 6 employees and moved to a larger office space. Andrea and I had been together for over a year, and I was starting to think about proposing. My parents were thrilled about my relationship with Andrea and the business success. "We're so proud of what you've built," Dad told me during one of our regular Sunday dinners. "And Andrea is perfect for you. She's supportive and caring." Then the dominoes started falling faster. John got fired on a Wednesday morning. No severance, no golden parachute, just security escorting him out of the building with a box of personal items. The company released a carefully worded statement about identifying significant financial irregularities and cooperating fully with law enforcement. Ryan called me as soon as the news broke. "Did you see the article about John? Dude got fired for embezzlement. Looks like karma finally caught up with that whole family." Local business papers picked up the story by Friday. Senior executive at major logistics firm terminated amid federal investigation. The details were vague, but the implications were clear. This wasn't just getting fired. This was career suicide. Sarah called me that weekend with an update on the family's situation. Patricia's been calling everyone she knows, trying to borrow money. They've had to put the house on the market, sell the cars, everything. Lexi moved back in with them, but they're burning through whatever savings they have left. The irony was incredible. The family that told me I was nothing without them was watching their entire world collapse. All the connections, status, and financial security they'd used as weapons against me, built on John stealing from his employer. A month later, the criminal charges were filed. Wire fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. The whole white-collar crime starter pack. John's mugshot made the local news, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in 6 months. Around that time, I was willing to propose to Andrea. We'd built something real together, a relationship based on mutual respect. She'd seen me at my lowest point and helped me build something better. No family drama, no status games, just 2 people choosing each other. I proposed on a Saturday afternoon in the park, where we'd had our first real date. A simple ring and a simple question. She said yes before I could finish asking. Ryan was my first call after Andrea said yes. "About time, little brother. She's the best thing that ever happened to you. When's the wedding?" My parents were overjoyed when we told them. "Welcome to the family officially," Mom said, hugging Andrea tight. "We couldn't be happier for both of you." 6 months after our engagement, I was reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant knocked on my office door. "Jake, there's a woman here to see you. Her name is Lexi, but she doesn't have an appointment." My stomach dropped. The restraining order had expired, and apparently she'd decided to make one last attempt at something. I texted Ryan immediately. "Lexi's here. Standing by if needed." His response was instant. "On my way. Don't let her in your office alone." I walked to the reception area and barely recognized the person waiting there. Gone were the expensive clothes, professional styling, and entitled posture. This was someone who looked like she'd been beaten down by life. "Jake," she said quietly, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I really need to talk to you." Every instinct told me to call security, but something about how broken she looked made me hesitate. "You have 5 minutes." She followed me into my office and sat across from my desk. Her hands were shaking as she started talking. "I know what we did to you was wrong. I know you probably hate us. But I'm desperate, Jake. We lost everything. The house, the cars, all of it. Dad's going to prison for 3 years, and we have nothing left." She was crying now, but not the manipulative tears I remembered. This was real desperation from someone who'd hit rock bottom. "Mom's working at Target. I'm waiting tables at some diner. We're living in a 1-bedroom apartment, and we can barely make rent. I thought maybe, since you're doing so well now, maybe you could help us." The audacity was breathtaking. Help you how exactly? I asked. Maybe a loan? Or you could hire me? I know I don't have experience, but I could learn. I'm good with people. I could do sales or customer service or whatever you need. She couldn't meet my eyes while she was talking. This was clearly rehearsed. Please, Jake. I know I have no right to ask, but we're desperate. I'll do anything. I'll work for minimum wage. I'll sign whatever agreement you want. I just need a chance. That's when Ryan walked through my office door. I'd given him an emergency key months ago, and he'd clearly decided now was the time to use it. Everything okay here? He asked, but his eyes were locked on Lexi. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Lexi's face went pale when she saw Ryan. She knew he'd never liked her, and his presence made it clear this wasn't going to go the way she'd hoped. I let her finish before responding. Looked around at my office, my successful business, my team of employees who respected what we'd built together. Then I looked back at the person who'd once told me I was nothing, without her family's connections. Lexi, 2 years ago you stood in our apartment and told me I was nothing without your father's help. You tried to destroy my business when I left. You violated a restraining order to harass my fiancée. And now you're sitting in the office of the company I built, asking me for charity. She flinched at every word, but didn't interrupt. The answer is no. You're not here because you're sorry for how you treated me. You're here because you need something from me. Ryan stepped forward. I think it's time for you to leave. She started crying harder, probably realizing this was her last shot at easy money. But we have nothing left. We don't know what we're going to do. Figure it out the same way everyone else does, I said, standing up. Work hard, make better choices, and stop expecting other people to solve your problems. Ryan walked her to the lobby and made sure she actually left the building. When he came back, his expression was serious. 2 weeks later, Andrea and I got married. Small ceremony, close friends and family. Everything their wedding wasn't supposed to be. Built on love instead of status, partnership instead of control. Ryan was my best man, and his speech about how Andrea had saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life got the biggest laugh of the night. During the reception, Dad pulled me aside. Your mother and I are so proud of the man you've become. You built something real, found someone who loves you for who you are, and handled all that drama with more class than they deserved. 2 years ago, Lexi told me I was nothing without her family. Today, she'd basically admitted they were nothing without their stolen money and fake connections. The best revenge really is living well. We'll see, I'd told Lexi that night she tried to break me down. And we did see. Turns out I was everything without them, and they were nothing without their lies.